What if you accidentally bought land sitting on millions of dollars in gold, but that gold destroyed your life instead of making it? That's exactly what happened to one of America's most famous explorers in 1847. This is the story of Mariposa, California, where the discovery of one of the richest gold veins in history sparked murders, warfare, and a 5-day armed siege. Welcome to the tale of how the greatest gold strike became the greatest curse. Welcome to Southwest Desert, where adventure meets the arid beauty of the American Southwest. Join us as we explore the rugged landscapes, uncover hidden historical gems, and dive deep into the lost gold legends and gold mining history of this iconic region. Please leave a like or comment. This is very helpful. Let's journey together into the heart of the Southwest Desert. Today, if you drive through Mariposa on your way to Yosemite National Park, you'll pass neon signs and busy shops, never knowing you're driving over some of the richest gold deposits in American history. While nearby camps like Hornitos and Bear Valley crumbled into ghost towns, Mariposa survived, built on gold, scarred by gold, and ultimately defined by gold. The man at the center of this golden disaster was Colonel John C. Fremont, explorer, war hero, and future presidential candidate. In 1847, after helping conquer California during the Mexican War, Fremont sent $3,000 to the American consul with simple instructions: buy me a ranch near San Jose. What he received instead was Rancho Las Mariposas, the Butterfly, 45,000 acres of worthless wilderness. Fremont was furious. He demanded his money back. He got nothing. For 2 years, Fremont cursed this terrible investment. Then came spring 1849, and everything changed. Fortune seekers flooding California's mother lode swept as far south as Mariposa. They found gold, placer gold glittering in the streams, small flakes and nuggets that hinted at something bigger. Then in August, prospectors made a discovery that would electrify gold-mad California. They uncovered the fabulous Mariposa vein, a massive section of the actual mother lode itself. This wasn't just another gold strike. This was the source, the massive underground river of gold that had fed California's streams for millennia. Fremont's worthless wilderness had just become the richest ranch in California. By September, Fremont was in San Francisco, waving chunks of gold-bearing quartz above his head, boasting of Mariposa's treasure. This wasn't just another gold strike. This was the source. For 2 years, miners had wondered where all that stream gold came from. Now they knew. The mother lode had been found, and it was buried beneath Fremont's land. The Mariposa vein was extraordinary. The gold-bearing quartz ran deep and wide, richer than anything found in the northern mines. Some samples showed visible gold threading through the rock like veins in marble. This was the kind of strike men dreamed about, the kind they'd kill for. Gold hunters came from everywhere. From San Francisco, they took steamers to Stockton, then pushed overland. From northern mines, they crossed the Tuolumne and Merced rivers. They came on foot, on horseback, in ox-drawn wagons, whatever it took to reach the gold. There was just one problem. This was Fremont's land. The gold seekers didn't care. They founded their town on squatters' rights and started staking claims everywhere. Fremont's rancho was a floating grant, a Spanish land title without clearly defined boundaries. Miners claimed their stakes lay outside Fremont's territory. They accused him of arbitrarily extending his borders to cover every new gold strike. It was the ultimate clash, old Spanish titles versus the American gold rush, and the prize was millions in gold. Mariposa's gold ore was so spectacularly rich that claim jumping became a favorite pastime. The gold was worth killing for, and men nearly did. In March 1850, a party of Missourians seized other miners' gold claims at gunpoint. The victims got a tall Kentuckian peace officer to intervene. He tried reasoning with the claim jumpers. They cursed him. Next morning, he returned with 90 armed miners. They threw the Missourians' tools across the flat and delivered an ultimatum: leave or watch everything get destroyed. The Missourians fled. When gold was at stake, frontier justice was crude but effective. But the real trouble started when Native American tribes in the Sierra foothills decided to drive out these gold-obsessed invaders. James Savage, who operated trading posts on the gold fields, tried preventing war. He took an Indian chief to San Francisco to show him the overwhelming power of the white population. It backfired catastrophically. The chief returned and told his people that united tribes could drive all the gold diggers from the country. War was declared. Indians pillaged Savage's stores. The Americans retaliated brutally, attacking a village and killing 24 people. The governor called for militia. The Mariposa battalion formed and tracked down tribes through winter snows. But here's the twist. While chasing Indians through the mountains, the battalion stumbled upon a breathtaking valley of towering cliffs and magnificent waterfalls. The Mariposa battalion's greatest legacy wasn't fighting. It was discovering Yosemite. Even warfare over gold could lead to accidental beauty. Meanwhile, the legal battles over Fremont's gold-rich land intensified. By the mid-1850s, he'd had the rancho surveyed to include the richest mining properties. These weren't just ordinary claims. They were sitting on some of the most productive gold veins in California. Miners who'd worked these gold-bearing grounds for years were outraged. In 1857, the Merced Mining Company jumped two of Fremont's richest gold mines, the Black Drift and Josephine. These weren't just holes in the ground. They were producing fortunes in gold ore. The Josephine alone was yielding thousands of dollars weekly. Fremont sued. But while lawyers fought in court over legal title to the gold, the Merced outfit eyed Fremont's third and most valuable prize, the Pine Tree Mine, sitting atop one of the richest veins of gold ore ever discovered in the Mother Lode. In summer 1858, Fremont brought his wife Jessie and 3 children to Bear Valley. While he managed his gold operations, Jessie enjoyed an idyllic existence riding horses and hosting evening conversations. For a woman accustomed to Washington society, it was thrilling. Then, in the early hours of July 6th, more than 50 Merced Company men rode toward the Pine Tree Mine. They were after Fremont's gold, and they'd take it by force. The pine tree wasn't just valuable, it was legendary. Its gold-bearing quartz was so rich that even small chunks were worth small fortunes. But Fremont had 6 well-armed defenders inside the mine shaft, working deep in the tunnels where the gold lay thickest. When the Merced party attacked, those 6 men built breastworks from boulders and mining equipment. They rolled gunpowder barrels into position. Their message: before surrendering this gold mine, they'd blow it to hell, burying the gold forever rather than let thieves take it. The Merced forces laid siege. They camped at the entrance and posted guards at every trail. They would starve Fremont's men out and claim the gold for themselves. This wasn't about law or justice anymore. This was about who would control millions of dollars in gold ore. Word reached Fremont before dawn. While his family slept, the veteran warrior held a war council. "They'll find," he said with a smile, "they have jumped the wrong man." Fremont mustered 27 men and counter-sieged the besiegers, cutting their supply line. Though outnumbered 2 to 1, his men swore they'd die sooner than yield this gold mine. The stakes were too high. This gold had already cost years of legal battles. Now it might cost lives. The sheriff arrived and ordered the Merced men to leave. They ignored him. He returned with warrants. Only 4 surrendered. This gold was worth more than law. Fremont sent messengers racing to Sacramento begging for militia. But Merced guards controlled every pass. Fremont's riders were intercepted. The gold mine seemed lost. Then a young Englishman named Douglas Fox slipped through enemy lines, reached Coulterville, and got word to Stockton. Telegraph lines hummed with Fremont's plea to the governor. After 4 days, the Merced Company offered compromise. Both sides abandoned the mine until the courts decided who owned the gold. But think about what they were asking: for Fremont to walk away from one of the richest gold deposits in California and trust his enemies to do the same. Fremont refused. The demand is contrary to all my sense of justice and honor. The Merced forces planned a final assault through underground tunnels connecting to the gold-rich pine tree workings. The plan was clever: bypass the defended entrance and attack from within, where the gold itself lay exposed in glittering veins. But Fremont's men overheard. A defender walked boldly past the enemy camp shouting warnings. Merced rifles cocked but didn't fire. They still couldn't pull the trigger first, even with millions in gold at stake. In desperation, they threatened Fremont's family. A messenger gave Jesse 24 hours to evacuate before they'd burn the ranch. But brave Jesse stalled, buying time. Hours later, a messenger from Sacramento thundered up the trail. The governor's order was clear: disperse or face militia. After 5 days fighting over gold, the Merced men retreated. They jumped the wrong man. But here's where the story takes its darkest turn. The ordeal devastated Jesse. Though Fremont won his lawsuit and secured legal title to his gold mines, his business troubles mounted catastrophically. The gold that should have made him rich instead buried him in legal fees and endless conflict. Managing the mines required capital he didn't have. Extracting the gold required equipment and expertise beyond his means. The very richness of the ore attracted more claim jumpers, more lawsuits, more violence. By 1861, Fremont lost control of the rancho entirely, sold off piece by piece to pay debts and legal costs. The man who owned some of the richest gold deposits in California history ended up financially ruined by them. Think about this. Fremont owned the Mariposa vein, one of the greatest gold strikes in the Mother Lode. The mines he fought so hard to keep produced millions of dollars in gold ore over the following decades. But Fremont himself never saw that wealth. The gold was real, the fortune was real, but it belonged to lawyers, investors, and eventually strangers. What would you do if you struck it rich? Would you build a mansion, buy the finest clothes, dine on delicacies every night? Now here's the real question. What if you became the wealthiest person in an entire territory, a millionaire when most people earned $500 a year, and you chose to live exactly like the poorest miner in camp? That's not a hypothetical. That actually happened in a remote Arizona gold mining town called Oro Blanco, Spanish for white gold. And today, we're diving into one of the most bizarre stories of fortune and frugality the American West has ever known. Imagine this. It's April 1873, and the Arizona Territory is still wild, dangerous, and full of promise. 30 miles west of Nogales, right near the Mexican border, a group of prospectors stand at the entrance of an abandoned mine, a mine that had been worked by Spanish conquistadors and Mexican miners who'd mysteriously walked away. Why did they abandon it? Nobody knows. Maybe Apache raids. Maybe they thought the gold ran out. But these American prospectors aren't buying it. They look at that dark tunnel and see possibility. They see gold, white gold, the kind of ore that sparkles with silver and gold mixed together, the kind that made men rich in California. So they light their lamps, grab their picks, and walk into history. Within months, their gamble pays off spectacularly. They've struck a rich vein, and word spreads like wildfire. By year's end, 40 miners are working the claim day and night, and 10 crude houses have sprouted from the desert floor. They call it Oro Blanco, after that beautiful white gold they're pulling from the earth. Soon, 7 massive arrastras, those ancient Spanish grinding wheels pulled by mules, are crushing ore around the clock. Imagine the sound: stone grinding on stone, braying mules, shouting miners, picks striking rock deep underground. This is the symphony of wealth being carved from stone. And gold fever is contagious. Once Oro Blanco proves there's precious metal in these hills, prospectors swarm the district. New mines spring up with names that capture the Wild West imagination: the Warsaw Group, the Yellow Jacket, the Ostrich. Each one promises fortune. Each one demands labor, and with labor comes community. But let's talk about what life was actually like, because this wasn't some romantic Western fantasy. The miners lived in shacks cobbled together from stone, adobe, and whatever scraps they could scavenge. These men were living like medieval peasants while digging for gold that could make them richer than kings. And the school? The school is where this story gets wild. Imagine sending your child to a building with only 3 walls. The 4th side is completely open to the elements. The roof? Just dried brush. No chairs. No desks. Kids sit on the ground or on store boxes. And on particularly cold days, and it gets cold in the Arizona high desert, the teacher passes around a bucket of hot embers. 1 bucket. For all the children. They pass it from shivering child to shivering child, desperately trying to warm frozen fingers enough to hold a pencil. Think about that. These people are literally pulling gold from the ground, and their children are learning arithmetic while frost forms on their breath. But fast forward to the mid-1880s, and Oro Blanco has transformed. The gold has brought stability and civilization, or the frontier version of it. The population has exploded from 40 miners to 225 people. 3 major mining companies, the Oro Blanco, the Esperango, and the Orion Silver, are operating with real capital. Those primitive arrastras, replaced by 2 massive steam-powered mills that process ore faster than anyone dreamed possible. The town now has a dentist, a physician, a blacksmith. There's a constable, a justice of the peace, and a deputy sheriff. 3 levels of law enforcement because things occasionally got rough. Multiple saloons are doing brisk business. Merchants sell everything from canned goods to mining equipment at premium prices. This is success, right? A real community built on the bedrock of precious metal. And this brings us to the man at the center of our story, the answer to that opening question. His name was James A. Robinson, and in 1899, he was reportedly the richest man in the entire Arizona territory. The richest man in all of Arizona. Robinson had built his fortune the frontier way: land, mines, and cattle. His empire was worth between $1.2 and $1.8 million. He was earning an average of $45,000 annually, which in modern terms would be over $1 million a year. And where was this titan living? In a mansion in Phoenix? A grand estate in Tucson? Nope. He was living in Oro Blanco, that remote mining camp where kids still warmed their hands over ember buckets in the 3-walled schoolhouse. But here's the twist that makes this story legendary. James A. Robinson, 67 years old, married to a Mexican woman, father to multiple children, earning $45,000 annually, lived on $500 a year, total, for his entire family. Let's do the math, because it's genuinely mind-blowing. He was spending about 1% of his income and saving the other 99%. His daily budget for his entire family, less than $1.50. He was living on less than what the poorest miner in his own camps was earning, despite being worth millions. What do you even do with $500 a year? That's basic food: beans, flour, coffee, maybe dried meat. Simple clothes you wear until they fall apart. A modest house, probably no better than the other miners. No luxuries, no fancy dinners, no gold watch despite literally owning gold mines, no fine horses, nothing. Why? Why would a man who could afford anything choose to live like he had nothing? The historical records don't tell us, but we can speculate. Maybe he was a product of that frontier philosophy that valued grit over glamour. Maybe his Mexican wife, from a culture that valued family over material display, influenced him. Maybe he'd seen too many rich men lose everything in boom and bust cycles and decided to hoard every penny for security. Or maybe he understood something his contemporaries didn't: that gold only has value if you give it meaning, and meaning doesn't come from spending. Here's the irony that makes Oro Blanco's story perfect. It's literally named white gold. The entire town exists because of gold. Every building, every business, every person, including Robinson, came for gold. Gold drove men to dig in darkness. Gold made them endure brutal conditions. Gold brought doctors and lawyers to nowhere. Gold funded those steam mills and paid for 3 lawmen. But for Robinson, the gold wasn't for spending. It was for keeping, for accumulating, for building an empire that existed mostly on paper. Like all gold rush towns, Oro Blanco's story has an ending. By 1903, the post office closed, the first sign of terminal decline. The gold was playing out. The easy pickings were gone. Miners drifted away to the next strike, the next promise, the next Oro Blanco somewhere else. There was a brief revival in 1908, when new mining activity sparked about 10 miles north and the post office reopened. They even called it Oro Blanco, creating confusion that lasts today. But this second Oro Blanco only lasted until 1915, when the post office closed for good and the gold fever finally broke. Today, if you drive 30 miles west of Nogales into the harsh Arizona backcountry, you might find ruins, stone walls standing against the desert sun, maybe the remains of those steam mill foundations. The gold is long gone. The people are scattered to dust. Even James A. Robinson is just a footnote in territorial history. But the questions remain, don't they? What is gold really worth? Is it worth more in the ground being extracted at terrible human cost? Is it worth more in a bank, accumulating but never spent? Or is it only worth something when it's used, to build, to create, to make life better? Oro Blanco asked these questions in real time. 40 miners chose backbreaking labor for a chance at gold. Families raised children in 3-walled schoolhouses because of gold. An entire community sprang up, thrived, and died because of gold. And one man chose to earn gold's rewards, but live as if he'd never found it at all. So, back to our original question. What would you do if you struck it rich? Would you live like those miners, spending your dust as fast as you earned it? Or would you be like Robinson, the millionaire living on a pauper's budget, saving every penny while surrounded by poverty? The truth that Oro Blanco teaches us is this: gold doesn't care what you do with it. It sits in the ground, indifferent to your dreams, your suffering, your choices. It's just metal, beautiful, rare, valuable metal, but still just metal. The real story is never about the gold. It's about what people do in pursuit of it and what they become once they find it. White gold glittered in those Arizona hills. It drew men from across the world. It built a town where none should exist. It created millionaires and paupers, often living side by side, sometimes even in the same person. And now it's gone. The gold, the town, the people, all gone. Just stories in the dust, waiting for someone to remember. Thanks for joining us on this journey into America's golden past. Until next time, remember, fortune favors the bold, but wisdom knows when enough is enough. Imagine this. It's 1930, and a massive new mill stands gleaming in the Nevada desert, ready to process untold riches from the mountains. Investors have poured their life savings into this venture. The machinery hums to life, and for a few glorious days, dreams of fortune fill the air. Then, someone makes a shocking discovery. There's no gold, not a single speck. The promoters had built an entire mill without checking if there was actually any ore to process. But here's the real question. How could this happen in 1930, when the same location had already fooled fortune seekers 70 years earlier? Welcome to the story of Como, Nevada, a town built on golden promises that somehow kept luring dreamers back, decade after decade, even as the mountain refused to give up its treasure. Our story begins in June 1860, when prospectors combing through Nevada's Pine Nut Mountains stumbled upon gold, real, genuine, glittering gold. Within weeks, over 100 miners descended on the area, staking claims and dreaming of striking it rich. They called their new settlement Palmyra after an ancient Syrian city. A savvy saloon keeper arrived first, because where there are miners, there's always money to be made selling whiskey, and other merchants quickly followed. By 1862, Palmyra had grown into a legitimate town of 400 people, complete with its own post office. But then something happened that would set the pattern for Como's entire existence. Miners discovered new gold deposits in a narrow cave about half a mile east of Palmyra. Unlike the scattered findings around the original camp, these new ledges looked promising. They looked like the real deal. Almost overnight, Palmyra emptied out. Businesses packed up and relocated. A new town was platted at the discovery site, and they gave it a simpler name, Como. Within months, Old Palmyra was a ghost town with nothing left but 3 stubborn saloons and a hotel. Como boomed for the next 2 years. Gold fever gripped the camp, and everyone believed they were sitting on top of the next Comstock lode. There was actual gold being extracted. The question was whether there was enough to justify all the excitement. Enter J.D. Winters, a rancher turned mining entrepreneur who decided to put Como's gold to the test. In early 1863, Winters dug tunnels into the mountain and built a small steam-powered mill to process the ore. Steam-driven mills were expensive, sophisticated pieces of equipment. Winters was making a real investment. The mill fired up, the stamps pounded the ore, the machinery processed the rock, and when Winters tallied up the numbers, he discovered something devastating. The gold barely covered his operating costs. After months of work and significant investment, he shut the whole operation down. But here's where the story gets interesting. Instead of taking this as a sign that Como's gold might not be worth chasing, everyone else seemed to interpret Winters' failure as a minor setback. Maybe he'd picked the wrong spot. Maybe his mill wasn't efficient enough. Maybe the real gold was just a little deeper. Winters himself moved on to become boss of the Yellow Jacket mine on the Comstock, where there actually was gold worth extracting. But Como kept dreaming. This is where our story introduces one of its most colorful characters, Alf Doughton, a man who could do just about everything except recognize a losing investment when he saw one. Doughton was a physician, a carpenter, and a musician who could play guitar, violin, and flute. He was the kind of frontier Renaissance man who could patch up your wounds in the morning, help build your house in the afternoon, and entertain you with a concert in the evening. But his real talent was promotion. Doughton became president of 6 different mining corporations in Como, all promotional ventures designed to attract investors rather than actually extract gold. He understood something fundamental. You could make more money selling shares than digging holes. The corporations issued beautifully engraved stock certificates printed in San Francisco, and agents fanned out across the Comstock region, selling shares to anyone who dreamed of striking it rich. To keep the dream alive, Doughton wrote the Como letters, dispatches sent to the Comstock once or twice a week, filled with optimistic news about Como's prospects. He was utterly convinced that Como would develop into a major mining center. The gold was there, he insisted. They just had to keep digging, keep investing, keep believing. Doughton kept believing until he went completely broke. The pattern was set. Como had gold, but never quite enough. It had potential, but never quite fulfilled. It had investors, but they never quite got their money back. Despite the questionable returns, Como developed surprising infrastructure for a town built on hope. The business district ranged from rough saloon dives to the Cross Hotel, a genuinely first-class establishment with carpeted rooms, a gentleman's bar, and a second-floor meeting hall where traveling ministers from Gold Hill conducted Sunday services. The town had its own newspaper, the Sentinel, which lasted exactly one spring, 1864, before moving to more prosperous Dayton. Even the newspaper couldn't survive on Como's promises. But Como had other problems beyond questionable gold deposits. The miners needed timber for fuel, construction, mine shafts, and mill operations. They found plenty in the piñon pine forests covering the surrounding plateaus. They cut the trees without much thought, because in their minds, the gold justified everything. The local indigenous people saw things differently. Those piñon forests produced pine nuts, a critical food source for surviving harsh Nevada winters. When miners started clear-cutting the forests, destroying years of food supply, some Native Americans fought back. The conflict was inevitable. Miners needed trees to extract gold that might not exist, while indigenous peoples needed the trees to survive winters that definitely would come. Como also faced political tensions. This was the Civil War era, and Nevada was officially pro-Union. But almost half of Como's citizens were Copperheads, Southern sympathizers in Northern Territory. Before elections, secret meetings were held to figure out who should be allowed to vote. Even politics in Como was contentious. By the end of 1864, Como had been thoroughly prospected. Every ledge had been examined, every promising vein investigated. The gold was there, but in quantities that couldn't sustain a boom town. The merriment that had filled Como's saloons grew fainter. The population dwindled. By early 1865, Como was finished, another ghost town in the Nevada desert, littered with abandoned dreams and empty buildings. Most gold rush towns end there. The boom goes bust, people leave, and the desert reclaims what was briefly civilization. But Como had one more trick up its sleeve. Actually, it had several. In 1879, someone decided to give Como another try. Maybe mining technology had improved. Maybe they'd missed something. This revival lasted until 1881 and actually produced more gold than the original boom. Como got its post office back. People returned. For a few years, it looked like Como might vindicate all those early believers. Then it faded again. In 1902, Como experienced another revival that lasted until 1905. Once again, production exceeded the 1860s boom. Once again, hope flickered in the desert. Once again, Como proved that its gold was real enough to tease, but never quite enough to sustain. These revivals lacked the colorful chaos of the territorial boom years. There were no Alf Daltons writing promotional letters or musicians playing flutes in saloons. The later revivals were business operations, efficient and focused, extracting what gold they could before moving on. They proved that Como did have gold, just never as much as anyone wanted to believe. Which brings us back to 1930 and the question we started with. How could promoters build an entire mill without checking for ore? The answer lies in Como's entire history. For 70 years, Como had been teaching fortune seekers the wrong lesson. Every time it seemed finished, it came back. Every time someone said the gold was gone, someone else found a little more. Como had created a pattern of hope that refused to die. So when promoters in the 1930s proposed building a large mill at Como, investors remembered the revivals of the 1880s and 1900s. They remembered that Como had produced gold, just never when expected. They remembered that doubters had been proven wrong before. They invested. The mill was built, a substantial, expensive operation. The machinery was installed. Everything was ready. And then, after just a few days of operation, someone finally bothered to do what should have been done first. They checked if there was actually any ore to process. There wasn't. The mill shut down immediately. The investors lost everything. Como had delivered its final lesson. Hope is not a mining strategy. Today, Como is ruins, cellars and foundations scattered across the Nevada landscape, silent testimony to a town that existed on promises. Over nearly 80 years, Como taught the same lesson again and again. There was gold in those mountains, just never quite enough. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.